Good morning and welcome to today's almost daily devotional. We continue in the book of Acts. I- this is where the book of Acts starts getting a little violent, a little not so pleasant to read. Paul has gone back to Jerusalem, and he's gone about doing what Paul does, which is making everybody mad. He's preaching the gospel, and some of the church leaders in Jerusalem, the people, fellow Christians, are starting to find that threatening. They're starting to worry or be concerned about Paul's influence on the church and the way that his influence affects their power structure. And so they get really upset with Paul and bring him in front of the Jerusalem council and start to question him and ask him things like on what authority he has to do that, to be preaching the gospel. And so the people sees him, the people in the temple sees him and take him to the Roman authorities. Well, they take him first to the chief priest, and then the chief priest turns him over to the Roman authorities, which is a story that should sound familiar. This is what Paul says in his defense. When I returned to Jerusalem and was praying in the temple, I had a vision. I saw the Lord speaking to me. Hurry, the Lord said. Leave Jerusalem at once, because they won't accept your testimony about me. I responded, Lord, these people know I used to go from one synagogue to the next, beating those who believe in you and throwing them into prison. When Stephen, your witness, was being killed, I stood there giving my approval, even watching the clothes that belonged to those who were killing him. Then the Lord said to me, Go, I will send you far away. The crowd listened to Paul until he said this. Then they shouted, Away with him, he's not fit to live. As they were stretching him out and tying him down, Paul said to the centurion, Can you legally whip a Roman citizen who has not been found guilty in court? When he heard this, he went to the commander. He asked, What are you about to do? This man is a Roman citizen. Paul said, I am a citizen of Rome by birth. At once those who were about to examine him stepped away. The commander was alarmed when he realized he had bound a Roman citizen. So here we see the difference between Jesus and Paul in their stories, and Peter for that matter. Peter goes through the same thing, and Stephen. When they're brought up, Jesus and Stephen and Peter, who are ethnically Jewish and who are part of the um, underclass, the non-Roman class, are bound by Jewish law. So the Romans let the Jewish people do what they wanted to do, essentially, as long as it didn't cause too much upheaval. And so Jesus and Peter and Stephen were all subject to that. That's why they could be killed so easily. That's why they could be killed. But Paul, who was a Roman citizen, had the protection of his Roman citizenship. And so the centurion and the commander of the garrison could not do what the people wanted because they didn't do that. The Jews couldn't capture a Roman citizen. And so Paul, in some ways, was protected by the state in which he lived, by his status in his society. He wasn't being any less controversial than Peter. He wasn't being any less controversial than Stephen. He certainly wasn't threatening them as much as Jesus did. But because he was a Roman citizen, he was protected. And that story reminds me of a friend in seminary whose name was Thomas. He was from India, and he once in class called us all to account. He said, American Christians have a lot of protection. He said, if I go and I'm a missionary somewhere in a country, he was in Vietnam, um, and I preach the gospel, then I don't have any protection. It's just me. But if you go where God sends you, and you go to Vietnam and you preach the gospel, then you know you have the protection of your citizenship. They're going to come get you. And he challenged us and he said that you who have privilege are responsible for using that wisely. And so, do we use our power, our positions of power, whatever they are, wherever we find them? Do we use them authentically? Do we use them to preach the gospel? Or do we take them for granted? Do we take them for granted and not utilize one of the tools we have in our quiver? in our belt? Can we risk a little bit more maybe than somebody else might be able to in the preaching of the gospel? God bless.